Today I am going to speak in English, hoping that some of the policymakers of Pakistan will understand what I need to say aptly and clearly. This morning I once again read in the newspapers about FATF. FATF needs to be highly patrolled by us. We need to know, if we don't, that India actively works in FATF against us, that India have neutralized Saudi Arabia, who is on the committee as well, and that through the not so recent but recently completed Pacific role that India has undertaken with commitments against China, that they have a stronger say. I was told in Islamabad some time back that we are accessing the new democratic government. But I was appalled to see that once again we're relying on former Republican Party supporters, people associated closely with Jared Kushner, who will not get a leg to stand on in Washington. And we don't seem to realize, and I give you an example, Mr. Hussain. He was plush in the Bush camp, and when the Democrats came in, he kept telling the world that Holbrooke was his accessory. Forget it. He couldn't get access anymore. And the then government correctly put him out of his misery and brought in another person who did, in my opinion, better than what he had done. Now, the question is, why did we wake up so late in preparing for the democratic government? And the answer is because we never prepare for anything. We only react to some things as they happen. Well, let me tell you, it hasn't worked. And with this statement today in the papers on FATF, we're still, every time we're told, oh, next time it's going to be resolved and we will be removed from the blacklist, from the grey list to normalcy. Well, it hasn't, and I'll tell you why. One, we have not canvassed those who could have helped us in the institution, and number two, we have not done substantially enough. Number three, why have we not done substantially enough? Because those appointed in charge of ridding us, as Beckett said of this, the king said of Beckett, of this meddlesome priest, well, it's still meddling. We are trying to control the borders of Pakistan vis-a-vis Iran. What a waste of time. Because in that, if it's money laundering you're after, it cannot be done by the sheer weight of the money that travels through. You have to work it out and say what is possible and what is not possible. Categorize it, list it. And if anyone wants us to stop the Balochistan-Iran border with this tremendous throughput which is taking place, well, then they should pay for it. But when we didn't make America pay for the Afghan war, we paid for it and got into the mess we are in today. Well, it is not surprising that nobody is willing to pay you your dues. Coming back to this aspect of Iran, I suggest we treat it more deferentially, because we don't know what we're doing, frankly. Now comes the question of what are we doing? And the answer is practically nothing. I remember at one stage how we could claim leadership, forget membership, leadership of the Islamic world. Well, it's not so. How we used to claim our relationships were with the United States and the West. Well, it is not so. How we used to claim of our strong presence in ASEAN. It is not so. Well, I don't mean to be critical, but what have we done? What have we done? Unless we take our occasional supplications to India to deal with us, even that is not so. What have we done? Where have we achieved what we need to achieve? And the question is, so I reiterate, where are we now? And the answer is, do we know ourselves? And the answer is no. You see, if you must pursue a policy, and there must be a policy, then you have to decide how you are going to behave and react to things happening in the world. I mean, today, if I look east and west, two of the most highly potential countries that could be of use to us and act with us in Europe, it is Germany, who used to be a very good friend and is not doing very much anymore. And in the East, it is Japan. Recently, Japan told the world that they will not join in encirclement of China. What does that sound like to you? Isn't that something that you should have developed or can still develop? And Germany told the West it will not compromise on its energy supplies, even if they be from Russia. Now, if you go back to my various blogs, these are things I have mentioned about you to extending relationship to China and Russia in certain fashion. And of course, this is one of them. What have we done to get closer to them? I personally believe that the Afghan issue and the issue of Iranian oil will not die in the immediate future. What role have we considered for ourselves to be relevant and poignant to the policies that govern these moves? Nothing. I don't think we have a foreign policy. I don't think we have a state. We have come into Pakistan into a situation where everything is secret. Well, nothing is secret. Everything leaks out. And the recent squabbles in Islamabad, in the High Court and subsequent actions, have confused people's minds internationally to the extent that they should respect your judiciary because you don't. So where are we going? Well, let's look at it. Ayub Khan's time, I remember hearing him personally speak of making Pakistan self-sufficient in wheat, which is topmost in his particular policy. Well, let's put it this way. That was achieved, and yet it has now been disachieved. Why? Because the sugar barons started playing games and wanted sugar, which is even in our neighbor India a major cash crop. And what did it come from? Where did it come from? It mostly replaced wheat. What did we do about it? Nothing. Yet we sanctioned huge sugar mills everywhere on political basis. Now, let's look at another thing. I remember when Ayub Khan was espousing wheat, a lot of people said rice, rice. And in Badin we had a burgeoning rice economy. We used to feed half of sub-Saharan Africa practically. Where is it today? We used our so-called expertise and created new breeds of rice which were yielding more, but they're not eaten in sub-African Sahara anymore. And what you produced is now mostly pushed as second and third class basmati, which it is not, to people, and you have lost a product and a market and a brand. And if you remember, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, when Pakistan was sliding down the scales, took a fistful of rice and said, we have this. And then promptly, I think, gave the BCCI the rights to it to get money. Well, the question is, we had the rights, now we don't even have that. And then, of course, other than rice and wheat, which are staples, we had huge products. I remember in the 60s, Iran would buy your entire quinoa production of Sargodha, and it was not enough. What are we doing now? The truth of the matter is, we created huge corporations, rice corporation, fruit corporations, and God knows what all. We allowed the entrepreneurship of these products and created money-making rackets everywhere, so nothing really goes on. Look at it this way. What are we, by the way? Are we a federal country, or are we ruled by 4 or 5 independent states as was envisaged in the Pakistan resolution? Well, we're not sure. All we know is we keep fooling the system. I think the Supreme Court should take notice once and for all and decide this issue, that an ordinance cannot be issued during the sitting of a parliament, and it lapses upon the calling of the new parliament. If these things are enforced, there can be no ordinances. But then ordinances are the only way we've worked for the last 40, 50 years. There is something wrong in our thinking, in our planning, and maybe what's wrong is there isn't any. Then let us come to other aspects. How do we view the world? Or how does the world view us? I told you earlier, Brexit will be practically a collapsing point for the UK. Well, have you seen? 9.9% of the British economy has shrunk. And that's just a start. I had warned you much earlier than that of the recession in America. Nobody listened here. I warned you that there is a time and place for everything. You've got to get rid of your miseries at a time. And I kept telling you, Afghanistan will never be resolved. If you read the extensive treaties and breaking of treaties between the British escape from Kabul to India, well, thousands of treaties, literally. And they'd all be broken the morning they were signed, not even the afternoon. How are you going to resolve that? And, frankly speaking, today in the papers there's also this question of the Taliban making their own laws. And now you know what happened in Islamabad or Rawalpindi High Court, because today I think Justice The Chief Justice has had plenty to say on that issue, and it should be said. You cannot call yourself a sovereign country and then, excuse me, make these agreements across the board at lower levels. There must be a due process, though we don't have it, and we must have the rule of law. Whether we have it is moot question. But everyone is circumventing the law. That is bad enough. As I said, why have ordinances when it's not allowed? Unless there is an emergency during the closure of the house. So everyone comes up very smart on how he beats the system. The praise of everyone is based upon, look at the question just now that is before us. And that question is the question of monies discovered by a foreign company, which was to be paid for. Well, you should have paid 5 million, you didn't. You're now down for 28.5 million under penalties and $5,000 a day. That's intelligence, I presume. We kept telling ourselves we will win the case filed by Pakistan and the government in India vis-a-vis the Nizam's $20 million. He gave 20 million pounds or dollars that he gave Pakistan in 47. You lost it, and everything that went with it. Nobody, but nobody, planned for it. And we're not planning for anything else. Look, unless you get this act together, you should have worked much earlier to have the ear of Joe Biden. I hope you can still do so. But remember one thing. You didn't need to do much. Joe Biden is not a new page in a new book. Joe Biden is an old page in an old book, and he is reviving. If anyone has said properly and believed, let's make America great again, it's Joe Biden. But he wants to do it through the proprieties of yesteryears. Whether that succeeds after 74 million people voted for Trump and Trumpism and all the baloney that goes with it. If the US Senate, the party of Lincoln, cannot bring its act together on principle, there's very little left to say. Get ready to believe that everything will be traded. The floor is open, even now, for Mr. Trump. About the only redeeming feature in all this is the American Supreme Court, which has acted honorably. Well, there you are. I'm glad that you allowed game to be played by the princes of Arabia. I'm glad it seems that your $1 billion oil purchase has been deferred, or so the papers say. But I'm sad that the head of the UAE was here and the Prime Minister spoke to him on the telephone. How very kind. Guest in our country of that stature. There should have been a slight meeting, perhaps a cup of tea at least. But none of that happened, because he's not here to meet the government, that the government put out in the papers to show that he came. Well, perhaps I do not understand what we aim to achieve by befuddling our populace. Let the truth be known. But then attend to the problems that have arisen between the Arabs and you here. I've been speaking about it for years and months, how it developed, case by case, instant by instant. We did nothing about it. I don't think we can go back to the yesteryears and remind them that Zulfikar Ali Bhutto wrote the constitution of the UAE. We can't remind them how we sent all our businesses packing out of here in 1971, 72, and they all went to Dubai and started the greatest kick on the economy there. Because it was not Dubai but Abu Dhabi with its oil. I mean, can PIA tell Emirates that we created you? Nobody'd believe it, and they'd be laughed out of the room. Sir, I believe it's time to take cognizance. It's time to understand that it's a shame when you can't afford to pay back monies that are sovereign guaranteed, and PI planes are held up, or even your family jewelry lying in the hock in New York and Paris, the Scribe and the Roosevelt. What are you doing? What are you doing? And whom are you fooling? You keep bringing in people from abroad and giving them more power. A country, and frankly, I support the idea that a political party should have the right to elect their senators through an indirect method by nominating, not by secret ballot. Why secret ballot? They came in on a party's name, did nothing for it. They were nominated by the party. Unless the independents who try and fight and then buy votes. So actually, buying votes is more important, it seems, than anything else. And who do they buy the money? Where do they find the money to buy the votes? Well, from your pockets, the public's pockets. I think it should be quite clear. If there's a nominated number of people in a party, they should be able to nominate that many senators. And if they can't fulfill a Senate seat, they would have to talk to an adjoining party to try and understand how that can be resolved. Let's look at it, Pakistan. We're not looking at anything. I mean, we still get these amazing... I say to the government of Pakistan, the day you can write off this troubling word, circular debt, which you can't show on your books, because nobody believes what it is internationally. The day you can show you have repaid the deferred oil prices, and the day you can show that your exports are far more, if not double, that of your imports, you're only fooling yourself. And let me tell you one thing on CPEC. CPEC is dormant, and you can't blackmail friends like China by only agreeing to move on it when you need more money from them to pay off other people in the world. I'd spoken on this issue much earlier, on the dollar, on the yuan, and so much more. Let's admit it. Why are we ashamed or afraid to admit the fact that China is bailing us out every day? We're in a sinking boat. They're the only ones with a pail pulling the water out from the bilges and throwing them overboard to keep you afloat. Why don't you understand that and behave accordingly? And There are still more changes coming. I've spoken of Merkel's Russian understanding. I've spoken of Japan's Chinese understanding, which is going to become apparent over time. But we should be able to see the signs, shouldn't we? When a storm is coming in the ocean, you see it miles away. You don't wait for it to be upon you before you lock down the portholes. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And the great question, why are we afraid to take a decision, though I actually think it's too late? And I also believe that it'll be like the UAE aircraft situation into Pakistan. You killed PIA, who was getting a share of all tickets sold to the UAE. Not a good idea. They should have kept a share of the tickets anyway. And these UAE aircraft asked for a couple of times a week, 3 flights or 5 flights a week. And they were willing to pay, I believe, 20 million or 25 million. We keep selling our family silver. This is a part of the silver that went. Well, we actually, and this is interesting, gave them the entire right of unending flights a week and no payment for it. We are brothers. Listen, Pakistan, there are no brothers and there are no friends between nations. This was aptly cleared by the very famous Secretary of State of America, who, when asked, who are your permanent friends? John Foster Dulles. And his answer was, we have no friends, only interests. Pakistanis think it's not friends. People wanted to know the Bhuttos on the basis of friendship with the Bhuttos. You must understand that, not with Pakistan. People wanted friendship with Nawaz Sharif. It was with Nawaz Sharif, not Pakistan. Because we've cut it that way. Today, people want to directly be friends with the Pakistan army. That's it. Thank God they're bailing us out all the time. But where is the institutionalization? And why can't we understand that it's only when it's based of interest, and we do not create an interest for ourselves to be attractive? Well, for the moment, I think that is enough. Thank you. We shall speak again.